The Garden of Live Flowers. Through the Looking Glass begins with Alice as a white pawn. Her dream is to become a white queen, but it won't be easy. Alice first encounters the Garden of Live Flowers, and the flowers greet Alice very rudely.
This time she came upon a large flower bed with a border of daisies and a willow tree growing in the middle. "Oh, Tiger Lily," said Alice, addressing herself to one that was waving gracefully about in the wind, "I wish you could talk." "We can talk," said the Tiger Lily, "when there's anybody worth talking to." Alice was so astonished she couldn't speak for a minute. It seemed quite to take her breath away. At length, as the Tiger Lily only went on waving about, she spoke again in a timid voice, almost in a whisper. "And can all the flowers talk?" "As well as you can," said the Tiger Lily, "and a great deal louder." "It isn't manners for us to begin, you know," said the Rose, "and I really was wondering when you'd speak. Said I to myself, her face has got some sense in it, though it's not a clever one. Still, you're the right colour, and that goes a long way."
If you listen closely, however, you'll hear that the flowers are the wisest of all the characters.
"I don't care about the colours," the Tiger Lily remarked. "If only her petals curled up a little more, she'd be all right." Alice didn't like being criticised, so she began asking questions. "How is it you can all talk so nicely?" Alice said. "I've been in many gardens before, but none of the flowers could talk." "Put your hand down and feel the ground," said the Tiger Lily. "Then you'll know why." Alice did so. "It's very hard," she said, "but I don't see what that has to do with it." "In most gardens," the Tiger Lily said, "they make the beds too soft, so that the flowers are always asleep." This sounded a very good reason, and Alice was quite pleased to know it. "I never thought of that before," she said. "It's my opinion you never think at all," the Rose said in rather a severe tone. "I never thought anyone would look stupider," Violet said, so suddenly that Alice quite jumped, for it hadn't spoken before. "Hold your tongue," said the Tiger Lily, "as if you ever saw anybody. You keep your head under the leaves and snore away there till you know no more of what's going on in the world than if you were a bud."
Although it sounds like the Rose is insulting Alice when it says to her,
"It's my opinion you never think at all,"
it's not necessarily meant to be an insult. If you believe Sam Harris, free will doesn't exist, and therefore the Rose is technically correct. Alice never thinks at all. Alice doesn't exist at all. There is no Alice. There is no self.
Now, the popular conception of free will seems to rest on two assumptions. The first is that each of us was free to behave differently than we did in the past. You became a fireman, and yet you could have become a policeman. You chose chocolate, but you could have chosen vanilla. It certainly seems like this is the world we're living in. Now, the second assumption is that we are the conscious source of our thoughts and actions. And so that your experience of wanting to do something is, in fact, the proximate cause of your doing that something. You feel that you want to move, and then you move. Okay, you are doing it. You, the conscious witness of your life. Now, unfortunately, we know that both of these assumptions are just untrue. The first problem is that we live in a world of cause and effect, and there's no way of thinking about cause and effect that allows us to say that the buck stops here. Okay, the buck never stops. Okay, either our wills are determined by prior causes, a long chain of prior causes, and we're not responsible for them, or they're the product of chance, and we're not responsible for them, or there's some combination of chance and determinism. But no combination seems to give you the free will that people cherish. Now, you could consider a generic serial killer.
The concept of no free will, or not having control over our decisions and actions, is a very complex concept, and one that has puzzled philosophers and priests for millennia.
Now, you could consider a generic serial killer. Okay, his choice to commit his last murder was determined by neurophysiological events in his brain, which were in turn determined by prior causes. Bad genes, the developmental effects of an unhappy childhood, a night of lost sleep because a car alarm was going off down the street. Okay, these events precede any conscious decision to act. So what does it mean to say that this murderer committed his crime of his own free will? Okay, if this statement means anything, it must mean that he could have behaved differently. He could have resisted the impulse to commit the murder, or he could have declined to feel the impulse altogether. And not on the basis of some random influences over which he had no conscious control, but because he was actually the conscious author of his thoughts and actions. Now, the problem is no one has been able to describe a way in which mental and physical events could arise that would make sense of this claim of freedom. Now, when we assume that violent criminals have such freedom, of course, we reflexively blame them for their actions. But when we look at this wider net of causality, the basis for placing blame seems to evaporate. The moment we catch sight of a stream of causes that reach back into childhood and beyond, the sense of his culpability begins to disappear. And to say that he would have done otherwise, or could have done otherwise, had he chosen to, is simply to say he would have lived in a different universe had he been in a different universe. Now, as sickening as I might find such a person's behavior, I have to admit that if I were to trade places with him, atom for atom, I would be him. There's no extra part of me that could resist the impulse to victimize innocent people. And even if you believe that every one of us harbors an immortal soul, this problem of responsibility remains. I cannot take credit for the fact that I don't have the soul of a psychopath. So if I had truly been in this person's shoes, if I had his genes and life experience and an identical brain or an identical soul in an identical state, I would have behaved as he did, and for the same reasons. That nobody picks their parents or the society into which they were born. Nobody picks the life influences that shape the development of their nervous system. You are no more responsible for the microstructure of your brain at this moment than you are for your height. So the role of luck in our lives appears decisive. One has to be very unlucky to have the mind and brain of a psychopath. Now, but the significance of luck is very difficult to admit because it seems to totally destabilize our sense of morality.
To give up our notion of free will would completely change the way we treat criminals. Instead of punishing them, we would spend more time rehabilitating them because we'd recognize that if we were born to the same family with the same socioeconomic status, we would have become a criminal too. But it's much easier to label people as evil and get on with the cleansing. Life's simpler that way. If you're looking for a job or trying to pitch a prototype for venture capital, you won't want to miss how Alice gets close to capturing the Red Queen.